Thank you very much for being with us. I am Donato Kiniger-Passigli, Vice President of the World Academy of Art and Science. And we have a very interesting session coming up on education for positive peace and conflict resolution. I'm here with the co-moderator, Eden MAMUT, who is professor of the Ovidius University of Constanta, Romania, and Secretary General of BSUN, also fellow of the World Academy. Among the panelists, I will then introduce them one by one, but I invite all of you to come to the podium. Please, Jonathan, join us. We have Goran BANDOV that I think will be online. Nicole Shoshana BEKERMAN, Professor TOPLAK, who is right here. And we also have Hugo BARDI, Paul SHRIVASTAVA, Jonathan GRANOFF, and Nikos Panagiotou. So the question that we have is the issue of education for positive peace. Positive peace, as you know, comes from the Galtung definition, the master that defined what positive peace is, the master of positive peace studies, that defined the fact that peace is not just the absence of conflict, is a societal issue. So you need to have a society and certain structures in place in order to affirm peace. It's not something that comes by itself. It's a difficult construction, but it is possible. Of course, in order to do so, we also need to resolve conflicts. And to resolve conflicts, there are a set of methods in place, approaches that can facilitate the peaceful de-escalation of tensions, of conflicts, and also the settlement, positive settlement of many conflicts in different places. Some of these are institutions and methods like democratization is an instrument in that development. They're all means for positive peace. And of course, also conflict settlements. We also have instruments like negotiation, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, inquiry. There are the traditional methods of conflict resolution in multilateral institutions. But before I go on, I give the floor to my co-moderator, Eden MAMUT, that I have already introduced, will give us his own perspective and introduce the subject before we go into the panel itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Donato. Thank you for this, let's say, frame that you shaped. And of course, the role of moderator is much more to induce questions and to facilitate the panelists to, let's say, to challenge them with some aspects. So I would like to, actually, I have prepared several slides, but from technical point of view, it's a little bit difficult to show them. But in any case, those will be uploaded in the website of WAAS, and you will have this opportunity. So in these slides, I wanted first to show the way in which we can identify some cycles in the accumulation of conflicts. So it is already based on statistics starting from early 870s and tracking the conflicts that have been documented in different sources, that there is a cyclic approach into this, let's say, accumulation of conflicts. And of course, we all know that the more we are getting closer to the 20th century, You can see here that the more we are getting closer to the 20th century, the cycles have a much, let's say, concentrated period, and also the amplitude based on the number of complexes getting higher and higher. So, of course, there are many threats that have been identified over the studies on conflicts, starting from resources, from, let's say, diseases, environmental problems, different aspects of imbalances or misbalances in growing biocapacity or humanitarian cataclysm. And of course, there are different perspectives regarding some of these factors. For instance, if we look on World Health Organization website, we can see that most of these very specific and very scary type of global diseases like cancer, like ischemic heart disease, like cerebral vascular disease, HIV, all of them have trends that are going to be more and more higher and more accumulated. The biological disbalance is getting higher. We know that we already, just in a few months, we are getting rid of all the resources of the planet, and we are estimating that by 2050, actually, we shall need 5 times more resources from our planet. And also another aspect that is maybe a little bit intriguing is also about information as a factor of conflict, because we are getting, you can look, 2 times more than the capacity of information that we can store. And this is energy, this is infrastructure, this is a huge access to different resources. So the trends in violent conflicts, you can see them from the research of different groups at Oxford University and so on. So you can see there is a trend. And also in the last decades, we can see that there are conflicts state-based, but also non-state-based type of conflicts. And let's say average duration, more or less are somewhere there. You can see the fluctuation, but more or less the type of duration is following. So there are many studies, and as also Donato presented, there are many ways of studying and different mapping factors that are interrelated in conceptualizing a generic conflict system. There are many connections to them. Here, there is a work of a very strong group coordinated by Professor and academician Zgurovsky, who studied the impact of different factors. What is very interesting, you can see there, that they took into consideration effectively even the solar activity. So the solar activity could show some regression connectivity with the accumulation of conflicts over the decades, according to this study. And what is extremely scaring, you can see here, the results of these models. So for instance, the 21st century, how is going to be from the point of view of conflicts based on these models? So the first 10 years is considered the origin. In the period of second and fourth decade, it is the period of growth. It is estimated that the conflicts in a global scale will have a culmination in the 5th century, and it will be a recession after the 7th decade of the 21st century. So there is already a very scaring picture based on these elements. So in this context, to come and, let's say, develop a methodological approach to address this kind of issue is a fundamental need for that. And this morning, I already presented our work at the BLEX University Network regarding those 5 principles that I mentioned this morning, and also the methodological approach for let's say, evaluating the possible types of conflicts, the way in which we could find out some interrelated connectivities, and of course the methodological solutions. So just educating, it is something that is too small and is too weak if we shall look into the picture that was drawn here. So it is a very strong, let's say, concern regarding the way of accumulating and the scale of the conflicts in this century. So we need something much stronger than only just making some training courses, having some discussions, trying to do different things like that. So from that perspective, maybe at one point, Donato, you will say also a few words about your campaign and different other initiatives. So let's proceed with the first speaker in the panel.
Thank you very much, Eden, for framing the issue so well and telling us about BSUN and your very thorough initiatives in this field. Restate what the lingering questions are. The lingering questions are: what kind of initiatives in education can help positively to advance peace? And what can be done through a new generation of leaders that we are going to shape through education? What can we expect out of the new generation of leaders, and what skills would they require in order to be well equipped to become peacemakers, to become peace builders? What do you think are the teachings and preachings that they will require throughout their career? Now, I also want to say that, one of the ultimate objectives that we have in peacemaking is to reduce distrust, is to promote cooperative arrangements. And that's why, as World Academy of Art and Science, we have initiated a project that accumulates now many organizations, many institutions like BSUN, but also as Alma Mater, as the Universitas Europaea. And that is, we call it Peace Offensive. And it means a well-timed, progressive initiative where we have opportunities. We create opportunities for dialogue. And at the same time, we de-escalate tensions and we analyze the root causes of conflict. Now, I think I have maybe indulged too much in terms of the presentations, both of us, but so I would give the floor now to Professor Ludvik TOPLAK, President of the Alma Mater Europaea University in Maribor, Slovenia, to address this subject.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to organize the 7th International Future Education Conference. World Academy of Art and Science and European Academy of Sciences and Arts signed so-called Vision for Global Peace Offensive in October this year, emphasizing the responsibility of the scientists and artists for the need for a new educational diplomacy. In my short presentation, I would like shortly to present some new approach to the Alma Mater Europaea University as a case, as a special case, I would say, of good practice. At Alma Mater have been developing and implementing in the last few years named logotherapy. Logotherapy, first we have to understand, to define what means to educate. Today, President Gary Jacobs gave a good description concerning the content of the education. I would start from the premise that to educate means to develop the mind and the shape of the whole person, including their heart and their character. In Switzerland, they said heart, head, and hands. And scientists argue that permissive upbringing in the Western civilization has accelerated the apathy and boredom among the young generation, and it is between many young people very evident that they lost the sense, their vision, their happiness concerning and interest for learning new contexts, as well for new creation, new work, and beauty in the relationship. That's why we need to show to young people the beauty of a new knowledge and the importance of learning. The scientists are therefore noticing increasing rates of depression, fear, eating disorder, self-harm, aggressive behavior, peer violence, education, and other mental distresses and illness. The European civilization in the 20th century, even in education, fostered the theories of hate in the terms of class, nationality, or status. And in the 21st century as well, it started with already with some new theories based on generational conflicts, on as well on the basis of many other criteria, including genders. And Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist, he developed the theory of so-called logotherapy on individual level, because many of his patients suffered of lack of the sense. And that's why logotherapy developed as a new approach in psychotherapy on individual level. But on social level, we need today the returning the sense to the young people for the whole generation. And that's why this is called logotherapy, and it has been developed at Alma Mater Europaea, and now we would like to continue with this practice mainly for the educators. It means how to educate educators. The trend or necessity of the educational approach must therefore go towards the holistic logopedagogy, which means that we must see the child as a physical, mental, and spiritual being. As well, let me cite as well Einstein definition: the man who regards his own life and the death of his fellow creation as meaningless is not merely unhappy, but hardly fit for life. Regarding closing the education time warp, aligning higher education with rapid advancement in technology, social needs, and the global challenges, we needed to focus on the following. First, development of a modern and attractive curriculum. Implement new and modern teaching methods. Institutionally transform universities, taking into account the new needs of society and the possibility of the modern technology. Educators or generations. With the logo pedagogy, Alma Mater Europaea wants to implement the vision of the global peace offensive as signed by the World Academy of Art and Science and European Academy of Sciences and Arts, and calls on scientific and artists, media, opinion makers, religious leaders, educators, and educational institutions and civil society to take all necessary measures to activate wisdom and power for beauty and culture of the life in opposition to the theories of haters. All of this in line with the transnationality, interdisciplinarity, and building bridges. These are principles of European Academy of Sciences and Arts, which are also principles as well of the academic, important part of the academic community. Thank you.
Ambassador TOPLAK, Professor, thank you very much. Thank you for your vision. That is also our vision, the vision of the Academy of Art and Science, for being so proactive and taking the leadership in the peace offensive initiative that we have launched together. Thank you for all you said. The floor now goes to Jonathan GRANOFF, who's next to him. Jonathan is president of the Global Security Institute. He's also a WAAS, World Academy of Art and Science trustee, but he's also very known internationally as a great expert of policies and disarmament issues, and also the ethical values that match the educational principles that we are trying to represent today. So, Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Donato, thank you very much. And I want to thank the university for hosting us. The World Academy was started by people who understood that the nuclear bomb was the first horse out of the barn that science and technology cursed humanity with the responsibility to make sure that we're not the last generation. Because this horse, running without the reins of law and morality, will end civilization. As we speak, one Trident submarine with over 140 nuclear warheads could literally end civilization in an afternoon. 2 men on the planet right now could decide to end humanity. Nuclear weapons are 1930s physics and 1940s technology. Science has not stood still. But our morality and our political institutions necessary to control the power of science has not evolved sufficiently rapidly and powerfully enough to constrain the powers that the methodology of science, which is only a few hundred years old, has given us to impact the natural world. There's artificial intelligence programs that talk with other artificial intelligence programs, allegedly in a language that humans can't understand. AI was asked, how many stones should a person take a day to keep their mineral content healthy? AI said 2. No more than 2. Because it had read an Onion article, a parody about health, and it couldn't distinguish between science and parody. In other words, artificial intelligence is not that intelligent. It can't distinguish humor from what's serious. It can't distinguish the fabric and feeling of being human, because the fabric of feeling human and being human is an art. It's the highest art. It's the purpose we were created to realize our humanity. No matter how much information science provides, if it doesn't provide the meaning of things, it's all for naught. It's all vanity. Measuring the cells, the bones, the skin, the body, the neighborhood, the nation, the planet, the solar system, the Milky Way, the entire cosmos. Measuring. Will we find the meaning of all of this? Will we find the self? Will we find the soul? Will we find our own consciousness? And if we don't find our own core as human beings, what is this journey for? It becomes preoccupied with technique without meaning, law without justice, philosophy without the pursuit of truth, art about art without beauty and transcendence, religion with rites, rituals, and practices without love and transcendence, financial systems disconnected from the production of goods and services, all about the how without the why. So Joseph Rotblat, Robert Oppenheimer, Bertrand Russell, Albert Einstein said, let's create an academy to address not just the how, technique of science, but the why. And education means educare, to draw out the humanity within humanity. Socrates, one of the first great educators who used the Socratic method by asking questions, said that he was he helped people give birth. He was a midwife for wisdom. Wisdom's what's missing. And wisdom, he said, was not acquired from information. It was remembered because it comes from the core of our humanity, which, for lack of a better word, we call the soul. There was a great man at the United Nations who helped create 11 institutions in the UN. And I want to honor him before I go on with my own ideas. His name was Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller was an assistant secretary general. His grandparents had 5 successive nationalities: French, German, German-French, French-German, etc., without leaving their village in Alsace-Lorraine as a result of 3 wars. The War of 1870, 1914, 1939. And as a child, he would look out his window at the border that he couldn't cross and long for the day when he, like the birds, the clouds, the sun, the stars, wouldn't have to be bound by an imaginary line. When World War II ended, he found a way to intern and work at the UN, and he worked there for 33 years. And he is known as the father of the World Core Curriculum. And he was the first person to talk about this need. And I think we should maybe call one of our projects in his name. He talked a comprehensive curriculum that would include our planet, home, and place in the universe, our one human family, and all the skills that are needed to understand it. Interfaith, interdialogical, intercultural experience, not just study, but experience. Pedagogy of experience. Our place in time, political and governing institutions of our nations and the planet. How do we govern? How do we govern the oceans, which provide at least 60% of our oxygen? One of us should lose a lung, could live. But if the third lung that breathes us all, we all die. So we have to have governance of that, just like we have to have governance in our neighborhoods. And then, of course, the miracle of our own consciousness, our own conscience, and the miracle of life. So I'm going to submit his core curriculum to WAAS. I think that we should come out of this conference with something very tangible that can be done now to express what we're about. That's what I want to introduce right now. I think we should promote a United Nations General Assembly resolution calling upon states to instruct their ministers of education and all education administrators to ensure that every secondary education student before matriculation should receive either electronically or physically a copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And where resources permit, classes dedicated to the study of that exalted document. Because social development requires relevant education, which is politically and morally enshrined in two important places in legally significant commitments that all the nations of the world have already endorsed. The Sustainable Development Goals and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In this regard, SDG 1 calls for ending poverty, SDG 4 calls for equitable and quality education for all, and SDG 10 calls for the reduction of inequality. And education is obviously critically important for all of these goals. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights explicitly states in Article 26(1), everyone has a human right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages, and compulsory. 2, education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, and it should promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial and religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Now, just imagine if the 15-year-olds in Myanmar had been given the Universal Declaration of Human Rights before they became soldiers. It would be very difficult for them to have commit what they've just done to the Rohingya, or if the Israeli students had it, or in my country, in the United States, because human rights exist in community, and community is where human beings develop. And one closing thought, apropos of this concept of community building in education. If I took a handful of rose seeds and I lit them on fire, it would be an adequate scientific explanation to say the purpose of the rose seeds was to give off heat and light and become carbon. It would be an accurate description of what had happened. But it wouldn't. It would not cover if you took the rose seeds and put them in the ground and watered them and let sunlight shine on it. Then you would say the purpose of the rose seeds was to express beauty and fragrance. The earth in which human beings develop is a place where human dignity is respected. And that's what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is. So the purpose of education for the 21st century is to create that enabling environment for students to blossom in fragrance and beauty. That's our job. That's our calling. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you very much for combining principles and pragmatism, for representing what our common duty is, and also having some creative solutions. So thanks again. Now we continue the debate that makes a great timing then to introduce Paul Shrivastava, co-president of the Club of Rome. He is also a professor at the Pennsylvania State University. Paul, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your patience, and thank also the other speakers online for the patience. We were not given notice that you were waiting, so we prefer to go ahead with those who were physically present here in Istanbul, but you are definitely with us. So, Paul, the question for you, as you know, is what are the best methodologies? What are the lessons also that we have to draw from the past failures in terms of our educational methods for peace? What are your views around that? How would you enlighten us, please, with your vision that we are certain it will match also our expectations. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Donato. Thank you very much. And thanks to the panelists in Istanbul who really laid out the groundwork for this discussion. And I also want to thank WAAS and the team who's doing all the activities behind the scenes to make this a hybrid conference. Greatly appreciated. I agree with everything that has been said by the various people. We need to be rethinking peace in a different way. And the description of this session begins with peace is not merely the absence of war. I agree. So what is it? What does peace actually mean for our future? As Donato and Eden have pointed out, Johann Galtung's notion of positive peace was dealing with all of social and economic life. And this needs to be taken seriously. I think education, the way it is treating peace, is sort of in a more traditional historical mode. It is not addressing peace as part of all aspects of social and economic life. So let me say a few words about what kind of peace we need in this coming era that scientists call the Anthropocene. Eden's charts about where we are headed in the future in the 21st century was very telling. The Anthropocene is a time when a very different kind of war is breaking out. It's not between people, it is between people and nature. At the Club of Rome, we have been debating the meaning of the ongoing wars in Gaza and Ukraine and Darfur, and the brutality and the bizarreness of these wars have raised fundamental questions about whether wars solve any problems, about the multi-generational traumas that they cause, and about what watching wars on live TV says about our humanity. These discussions have resulted in two publications, a series of 17 essays, reflective essays called Enduring Peace in the Anthropocene, and a concept note on planetary peace. I want to talk about planetary peace as the kind of peace we should be shooting for. It is not merely the absence of war. Instead, it is a pervasive presence of non-violence in all spheres and all systems of life. In the Anthropocene, the primary source of mass violence and destruction of human life and property will not be caused by traditional political wars between nations, but rather by the breakdown of ecosystems. Climate change with extreme weather events, pandemics, ocean acidification, decline of all these ecosystems will be the cause of massive upheavals, death, and destruction. Then in the next 100 years, we are likely to see more massive death events than all the wars and exterminations in human history. So we are facing now a kind of existential risk. And peace needs to deal with that existential risk. It needs to be a response that is at scale with these risks. So we need to reimagine existential opportunities, reimagine human existence in different ways, relearn to be human in harmony with each other and with nature, with different purpose, different ways of living, and different livelihoods. We propose the idea of planetary peace that seeks ending all wars and mass violence from ecosystems collapse. Planetary peace is systemic. It is about redesigning our economic, social, and cultural systems with the purpose of the flourishing of life. It is based on two principles, very briefly: the principle of regenesis or regenerative living, and eco-civilizations. A sentence or two about each one, and then I'll close with some implications for education. So regenerative living is simply opposed to the kind of extractive living that we have been doing in the last 200 years. We are part of a larger living system. We cannot simply extract goods and services from that living system. We also need to give back so that it can regenerate its own life. So we are part of a bigger living system that we need to contribute to. And the principle of regenesis, whether it's in agriculture, you can have regenerative medicine. There is even people talking about regenerative finance and regenerative economies. But the idea of a give and take, a way of mutually supporting the larger life system. The second is this notion of eco-civilization, a vision of just and equitable living for all on a healthy planet. There are many visions of eco-civilization in Eastern and Western philosophy, many manifestations in the activities of NGOs today, and even the Chinese government has issued an economic policy on eco-civilizations in 2015. So if we are to invoke this larger concept of planetary peace, what can educational institutions do to help? First, I think we need to make all education peace-centric, in which we promote peace within oneself, that is peaceful mind, that is mindful of peace, a peace within communities, that is peaceful economies, peaceful food, water, and energy systems, peaceful transportation, peaceful entertainment, and so forth. And third, peace with nature, beginning with seeing humans as part of nature, acknowledging the rights of nature, learning from nature. This would lead to completely new kinds of curriculum. The core curriculum that was suggested by an earlier speaker could be a great starting point, but we need to think all economic systems and social systems from the point of view of peace and non-violence. Modern food systems, what we are currently in the midst of, killing the soil, killing 80 billion animals every year to extract food. I mean, this is not a peaceful system. We are on a completely wrong track. In many of our systems, if you do the deep down analysis, we are on the wrong track, and we need education to first of all do a critical analysis and build curriculum in all these areas so that peace and nonviolence are centered. And finally, I would say that there are planetary peace pedagogies or ways of teaching and ways of learning that supplement the scientific pedagogies that are predominant in our universities and schools. We need to be learning from nature, from mountains, from rivers, and from trees, from indigenous knowledge systems. So there's a lot of work to be done by educational systems at all levels. And I just offer these thoughts as a way of getting us a jump start on the discussion. So thank you very much for hearing me out. I will stay as long as I can and hopefully participate in the discussion too. Thank you very much, Donato.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks a lot for restating the importance of all the inextricably linked threats and also their multiplying effect, their interaction, but also the opportunities. You put the accent on opportunities, on quality of education, on from extractive to regenerative economies, and of course, peace-centered education. That this is part and parcel of our same motto. When we call it peace offensive, we mean that the strategy is to be active on the peace education, to be more visible on that terrain. So thanks a lot. Now, I'm conscious that we have an order of speakers. So the next one would be Goran, but I would ask Goran to be a bit more patient, and I would prefer to give the floor to Nicole Shoshana BEKERMAN to continue on the aspects of values for education, the ethical values that Paul was also mentioning, and then we will go to Europaea, and to conclude, of course, we will have Goran BANDOV. So, Shoshana, you are with us. Thank you for being with us. You are the director of the Inter-Parliamentary Coalition for Global Ethics. So you are the perfect person to tell us what are those ethical values that our educational programs should be permeated with in order to pass on a different feeling, a different hopes also to next generations, present and future generations, in order to have a better world. Shoshana?
Thank you very much. And first, I want to start by thanking the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, the moderators, and the panelists for this timely Congress. Again, in this session, we are asked to deliberate on what kind of education is required to foster the development of leaders in diplomacy and conflict resolution, and I would add conflict prevention. What types of initiatives are needed in order to make it accessible? The Inter-Parliamentary Coalition for Global Ethics in the past few years has been focusing on promoting mandatory education, that is legislation for mandatory education for the culture of peace and human security in various in the national parliaments of UN member nations. As we know, military conflicts always end with agreements which have limited shelf life. World War I led to World War II. Conflicts in the Middle East reoccur almost on a permanent basis, as we are currently witnessing. Same is true for Africa and Asia and around the globe. The missing link in all the agreements and all the political solutions is what UNESCO has clearly stated in its constitution, that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. The declaration emphasizes the principle that peace is not merely the absence of conflict, but also requires a positive, dynamic, participatory process in which dialogue is encouraged and conflicts are resolved in a spirit of mutual understanding and cooperation, which includes tolerance, respect for different ethnic groups, different views, different religions. To this end, the former Director General of UNESCO, Federico Mayor, who is also a patron of the Inter-Parliamentary Coalition for Global Ethics, has introduced the concept of education for the culture of peace in the late 1990s. The culture of peace is not only an arbitrary concept, it is also the basis for human security. It also appears in the SDGs as item 16, as aiming for peaceful societies, which basically is the foundation for the success of all the other SDGs, including environmental protection, of course. Towards that end, the United Nations has issued various, dozens of resolutions, including the Day of International Peace, the Day for Human Fraternity, dialogue amongst civilizations. It began with, in 1999, the Declaration on Program of Action on a Culture of Peace. The lacuna in all of these resolutions and days is that there are recommendations for education for the culture of peace, although not one of the UN member states has legislation that mandates education for the culture of peace. The Inter-Parliamentary Coalition for Global Ethics has stepped into that lacuna, and we are currently in the process of signing an MOU with a UN agency and one of the institutions in the Emirates, which has excelled in education for tolerance, again, which has enabled it to sign the Abraham Accords. I will quote some articles of that MOU. One is to develop a core curriculum, create a comprehensive core curriculum grounded in the shared values of tolerance, democracy, coexistence, human rights, culture of peace, and freedom as embraced by the Abrahamic faiths. The curriculum will serve as a model for educational systems in the Middle Eastern nations and provide a best practices framework for addressing social and international conflicts globally. Two is global publication and adaptation, to publish the developed curriculum as a model program with the goal of enabling its adaptation and implementation at a global level, which means different values for the different geographical areas. And advocate for legislative action, advocate for the adoption of legislation in all UN member states to make education for the culture of peace a mandatory part of national curricula. This includes engaging with policymakers and international organizations to support the integration of peace education as a fundamental aspect of lifelong learning. The aim is to train on one level, political leaders, civic leaders, media, and on the other level, teachers who will be teaching curricula from kindergarten through high school. A lot of the curriculum is based on shared values. In the Middle East, we have young influencers who emphasize the shared values of the Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, which share historic common roots in the Middle East. These monotheistic religions trace their origins to Abraham and emphasize belief in one God, divine revelation, and ethical principles like the Golden Rule and the 7 Noahide laws. These values are also shared in Europe and in most Western democracies. The emphasis on culture, heritage, and shared values can build unity and common purpose. And in this arena, I think since you are centered in Turkey, I think Turkey has an important role to play. As we know, the Prophet Abraham was born in Haran, which is situated in Turkey, in southeast Turkey, and refused to worship the idols. And that is when monotheism was born. Just as a side remark, I served as a press liaison officer in one of the Turkish embassies in the Middle East for many years. And I learned of the importance of Turkey really to serve as a uniting factor rather than as a divisive factor. Talking about shared values, Africa has shared values, which is called Pan-Africanism, developed as a concept to link all people of African origins by the creation of a worldwide brotherhood to defend, promote, and advance their interests. So that we are, first of all, focusing on model curriculum for the Middle East, but this can be adapted to the shared values of the other geographical areas. I will conclude by just noting that the appendix to this MOU will include, including other parties, including relevant advisory and partner institutions who may be incorporated into this MOU through an agreement of accession. These entities shall be formally designated in an appendix which may be amended as needed with the consent of existing signatories in recognition of the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the United Nations Resolution on the Culture of Peace. So we invite all relevant parties to join us and look forward to success. We have been working with the World Academy of Arts and Sciences on this for several years. I know Dr. GRANOFF, I think, participated in our side event August 23 at the United Nations, and we look forward to continued cooperation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. BEKERMAN, Shoshana. Thank you for the ethical principles that you have delineated so well, and also for making reference to the culture of peace. Your MOU, that is certainly extremely valuable, a very valuable instrument, as it is our initiative for peace. All initiatives that we are taking are for peace. So we are looking for reciprocity. So whatever is complementary And whenever we have the same goals, the same principles, we are happy to join forces, and we expect reciprocation, of course, for the initiatives that are geared towards the same end on the part of the World Academy, that, as you know, has a campaign on human security for all that is now on its third year, but has been nurtured within the United Nations and continues its effort unabated. So now that we had the ethical principles delineated, we want also to hear from scientists, and in particular from some visionary scientists such as Ugo Bardi, who is from the National University Consortium of Materials, Science and Technology of University of Florence. He's also full member of the Club of Rome and a fellow of the World Academy. We want to hear from him. He is also an author, an accomplished author of many books on the present and future of humanity, and he's also an environmentalist. We want to hear from you. What are the prospects? What are your expectations? What is your prognosis in terms of the future of humanity? And what are the tools that we should leverage on for the present and future of education? Hugo?
Thank you very much, Donato. And I should do this in 5 minutes. It's a big task. Anyway, I will try. And I would like to start connecting to the previous presentation by Professor MAMUT. He showed some data about the frequency and the intensity of conflicts, and which I think is the initial approach. My formation is that of a physicist, essentially. So I tend to study phenomena like war. I think the first thing we should do is to study it in its temporal behavior and see what happens. Now, I can show you, you mentioned the books I wrote. I can show you this book, this recent book. The title is a little bit unsettling, I'm sorry, but I think Professor MAMUT could be interested in some diagrams that you can see in this page. It's not very clear, but we studied the frequency and the intensity of war over a time span of about 600 years. And the result is that as correctly Professor MAMUT showed, there is an intensity, an increase of intensity in conflicts that started not very long ago, maybe a couple of centuries or years ago. And the 20th century was especially bad. We found a connection between population and conflicts, which is probably unexpected. More people tend to engage in more wars. The point is that our study, we didn't find any external factor influencing wars. Wars happen by themselves. They are self-organizing phenomenon, as the physicists say. They have a statistics. We can study the statistics of war, but they are like natural phenomenon, like avalanches, like landslides, like earthquakes. They happen with a certain frequency, with a certain probability. And if that's the case, then there is very little that we can do, even in terms of education. That would be a pessimistic conclusion, but I don't think we have to be so pessimistic, because if you look at this diagram that I was showing to you, you see a lot of wars, a lot of conflicts happening, flaring and going up and down, and people die, and explosions and wars and shooting and things. But in this diagram, there are only 2 spikes for nuclear weapons, which is strange, because somehow nuclear weapons used 2 times in 1945 and never again. Why? And I think this is an interesting point, because again, in this book of mine, I try to examine one case in 1956 during the Korean War, there was a proposal by General MacArthur said, why don't we finish this war by throwing 40 nuclear weapons on Korea, Northern Korea, and that was not accepted. It didn't happen. Why? And I think there is a role of education here. Let me show you another book. It's not mine. It's the story. This is the Italian edition of a book published in 1956 by Walt Disney. The title is Our Friend, the Atom. This is the Italian edition that I probably read when I was 10 years old. And much of my life is the result of what I read in this book. And this was propaganda, was government propaganda, but of the good kind. The American government tried to diffuse, to slow down, to cool down the nuclear madness by emphasizing the friendly characteristics of nuclear energy. There was a story of an evil genie that could be tamed by some trick. And this was very good. It's extremely good as an effort. Not meaning to recommend nuclear energy now. Times have changed. It was 70 years ago. Today, nuclear energy is obsolete. But what I like of this book is that it treated the target, the people, like adults. It's impressive because this book explains to you the story of nuclear energy, a lot of chemistry, a lot of interesting things at a good level for an introductory course of nuclear physics. And it worked. It's unbelievable that if you treat people like adults, you teach them the things how they stand, I think it's possible to educate, but we want people to decide by themselves. They're adults. I don't mean politicians. Politicians is another category, but normal people like us, they can understand a study. And that's unfortunately something that I think we have lost a little bit. So I think for the initiative that Donato mentioned several times, that he was one of the originators of the initiative, Peace Offensive, in my modest opinion, we should learn from this successful effort to tame a very dangerous thing that was nuclear energy and use education to treat people as adults able to judge by themselves and to take reasonable, human, ethical, and moral decisions on peace. And thank you very much.
Hugo, thank you for your vibrant presentation and for bringing more ammunitions in terms of the importance of the peace offensive. I'm now pleased to give the floor to a political scientist coming from the same disciplines that I come from, and who is professor at the University of Zagreb and is president of the Croatian Club of Rome. I'm talking of Goran BANDOV. Goran, floor is yours. You know the question.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Donato. I'm very, very happy to be with you here, but I'm at the same time so sorry that I am not in Istanbul. I really wanted to be, but I have some obligations here in Zagreb, so I was not able to join you in Istanbul, but I'm happy to be here online. So it's really my huge privilege to be here with you, Donato and Eden, but I'm so happy to be with really distinguished panelists together with Nicole, Ludvik, and Ugo, and Paul, and Jonathan. That's really amazing panel you organized. Thank you for that. Only shortly, allow me to introduce myself for the people that don't know me. So I'm Goran BANDOV. I'm professor of international relations and diplomacy. But I would be happy actually to come in my young age. When I was a young child, it was the war in my country. I was only 13. And I spent a couple of months of my life, 3 months, in the basement of my house. And after these 3 months of spending in the basement of the house, government made decision, we have to go out of the city, and I flee to another country in Germany, and I become refugee. And I was only 13. And you know, when you are 13, then you are really young boy, but you know, actually in one night I become adult. You have to become adult immediately over the night. And then that was my time of my refugee time. Somehow I made a decision that was not consensually, but that I made this decision. That was decision I will do everything what I can do in my life that no one else suffer as my family suffered, I suffer, my city, my nation suffered, and that is actually everything what I am doing in my life, in my career, but actually in my life, I'm trying to do what is possible to protect others. That's the reason I studied peace at the Hamburg University and in Chulalongkorn University. And I have really long-standing collaboration with Rotary Peace Fellow programs. And I'm Rotary Peace Fellow and Rotary Peace Activator. That for me, when we are talking now, to come back to the topic, when we are talking about the world and the peace education, 35 years ago, we all celebrated the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was a time of solidarity and dialogue and cooperation and collaboration, freedom, peace, democracy, and we celebrated all these fields. But, you know, when we are seeing the period we are living today, we are living in very turbulent period of the world. Somehow dialogue is not anymore in present. We have more silence than dialogue. We don't have cooperation. We have much more chaos. Somehow we forget what is really freedom and what is really peace, and many countries are today suffer under war, and we have a lot of challenges in the moment. Allow me only to mention a couple of challenges we are facing in the moment as a world, and that is closely connected then with the topic what we have to done with the peace education. The first challenge we have in the moment is demographic changes in different countries. In some changes, demographic changes are the growing up, and in some is going down. But all these changes are really difficult for many countries, and close connected to demographic changes, we have the global migrations. The global migrations, of course, we have different types of global migrations. But prediction is actually we will have much more global migrations in the future than we have ever seen. Additional challenge we have in the modern society is the question of the artificial intelligence. We were so smart to make artificial intelligence, but I'm not sure that we are too smart to recognize all challenges what artificial intelligence brings to us. Of course, the topic of climate change, we have already heard climate change a couple of times in this conference today. Climate change is, we all facing climate change. Long time ago, science community spoke about it. To be honest, many people actually saw that everything on TV long time ago, and you watch on TV and you think that it's so far away. But in the modern age, you can go to your window and you can see the climate change happen in your neighborhood as well. So the climate change is here, and we didn't make a mechanism to adaptation to climate change, and we have really to do a lot of efforts in this perspective. And as I said already, we have a lot of different wars in the moment, and that is, of course, very, very dangerous. It is not only Ukraine war, we have a lot of other wars in the moment and very difficult situations in many, many, many countries. And if I don't make mistake, I think Jonathan mentioned already Rohingya situation in Bangladesh and in Myanmar, of course. So we have a lot of these kind of situations, very, very sensitive situations in the globe. So when we are talking about peace education, we are talking about, of course, on the peace, positive peace concept, we are talking about necessity to be concentrating same time on theory and in the practice. To be honest, I'm in favor. So I'm professor. I should be in favor of theory probably, but to be honest, I'm more in favor of practice, because I really think that we need much more practice in theory. That we need much more practice and experienced people and leaders in our school system, in our university systems. We have a lot of professors. They know amazing books. They write amazing books. But we need much more people that are actually from the ground, from the fields, and that know what's really happened in the field. So when we are talking about this concept, allow me only shortly to mention we know different, we spoke of course about Johann Galtung concept, but we have already different organizations, different think tanks, different international humanitarian or think tanks that are working on already on some pillars. And I think one of this organization is a think tank from Australia. It's Institute for Economics and Peace. They're working together close with Rotary International, and they developed some 8 pillars on positive peace concept. And I think these 8 pillars are really necessary for us if we are doing some education programs. And when we are thinking on it, I think it should be all these pillars should be somehow introduced in the course. The first pillar is the well-functioning government. A well-functioning government can be understood as a government that respects the rule of the law. That is, of course, the most important rule of law, justice, effectively manage society resources, and has transparent vision for the future development of society. That is one of the pillars. Another one is sound business environment. That is, of course, the healthy business environment is essential to ensure positive peace. It provides many individuals with job opportunities. Of course, when we are talking about resources, equal distribution of resources is really important. We know that all resources are actually limited, and unequal distribution of resources is one of the key reasons for escalation of conflict within society or between the countries. One of the pillars is acceptance of the rights of others. It is really important that we accept others, that we accept other identities, the national, ethnic, religious, cultural, linguistic, gender, sexual, or other identity. Many of the wars, many of the conflicts we have in the moment are actually based on non-accepting of rights of others. Good relation with neighbors is, of course, one of the pillars of this concept I'm talking about. The good relation with neighbors are considered as friendly connections between individuals, of course, communities and the states, and the free flow of information, because the society without information, without knowledge, it's easy to be manipulated, and that is something what we see almost on everyday basis. Is the lot of fake news, a lot of manipulation, and the world should be much more transparent, and as I said already, especially in the media. And one additional pillar is the low level of corruption. We know that corruption is a huge problem in many societies and many developed societies as well. And not only that, as you see already, all those pillars are somehow connected. It's almost like in Agenda 2030, everything is connected. So when I now introduce this concept of positive peace made by Institute for Economics and Peace and in collaboration with the Rotary International, allow me only to speak very directly about what I'm thinking, what is the best way, how to organize some program. As you know already, we have a lot of programs, a lot of different programs in the world when we are talking about peace. But to be unique, to be very direct, I think we, as a World Academy, of course, needs to make, and I very agree with Nicole, lifelong learning process and lifelong learning programs are really important, and I think that is direction for me as well. So we need to make probably one not really academic, more professional, more practical oriented short program for future leaders. When I'm talking about future leaders, I'm thinking we have to bring together leaders from different disciplines, and not only academicians. We need leaders from, for example, the fishermen, and we need the farmers, and we need people like the writers or lawyers. We need everyone actually in one group, because all of them will bring to us totally different perspectives. And I think that is really their dialogue will help the program to be better developed. And I know that I have only 5 minutes, and I'm almost sure that I already spoke more than 5 minutes. So I will now conclude with the sentence I truly believe, and that is we built too many walls and not enough bridges. And the last, peace has no good alternative. Thank you all. Thank you.
Goran, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your thoughts, for your recollections. You told us about the period of the war in former Yugoslavia, 92, 93, when you had to hide down someplace and then you had to flee your country. As you may know, I was a peacekeeper in your country during those days. And one of our preoccupations was, in fact, the brain drain. One of the casualties of wars is, in fact, brain drain. The fact that youth have to leave their countries. And so that was one of the questions. Are they coming back? Would they come back one day? So, well, you are a testimony, and more than a testimony, you are an actor of that coming home. And we are pleased that that happened, because without that kind of intelligentsia, you cannot rebuild a country. You cannot rebuild the facilities of a country. So I think you also mentioned the various challenges, the importance of understanding patterns of migration, climate change induced or economic induced, and your pillars of wisdom, for sure. I would group them into a very simple recipe that I call it contact, opportunities, and grievances. That can be seen on the negative side of also grievances, but you can also have lack of grievances the moment that you sort problems out. Of course, contact between different actors, different factions, different positions, and opportunities. If you don't have opportunities for the future, obviously, if you don't have valid educational programs, you generate conflict. If instead you create good opportunities, obviously you stimulate new economies, you stimulate the circular economy that Hugo BARDI was talking about. So thank you for your expose. Thanks to all high-level participants in this panel. But I think now it's time for questions. The first questions come from the co-moderator. So Eden, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think we have some amazing panelists. I would like to go a little bit like that because I cannot see their faces. So thank you all for your contributions. I would like to thank to Professor BARDI for very nice examples for the books that you have shown us and the work that you have done on this. So the question I would like to start from you, but it's a little bit more than just a problem addressed to physicists. You mentioned that conflicts, according to your studies, is much more close to so-called systems that are self-organized. And there were little factors that have been identified in regression to the accumulation of conflict phenomena. But you mentioned that you study demographics. That might be one of the factors that could influence, let's say, the growth of the number of conflicts over the year. My question is also if you consider that welfare could be a factor for accumulation of more conflicts. And, you know, generally we have seen that in societies or communities where there are now no means, for instance, from financial point of view to, let's say, afford weapons and different other, let's say, facilities, they would not be so prone to react and to initiate conflicts. So from that perspective, could we help the sociologists and the political scientists with a vision coming from physics and to mention that welfare in the sense of material and energy availability in a system might be connected in some sense to this kind of occurrence of conflicts? And the second question is going to Goran from a different perspective. So you know that at present, there is a trend in some of the societies. We were discussing last evening with Jonathan about Netherlands, but not only in the Netherlands, there is also an experiment in Finland and there is an experiment also in Spain where the governments are testing the possibility to go towards 4-day work. And in this way, to have a lowering, a reduction of the incomes of the, let's say, members of the society. Do you think that by lowering the incomes, lowering the pressure, and lowering at the same time the consumerism path, this could ease the process of let's say, social conflicts? Thank you. Maybe Hugo, you will start first.
Okay. Yes, with pleasure. It's a very interesting set of questions. Thank you, Professor MAMUT. It's anyway. It's let me start by saying that we have not been the only ones doing this kind of studies. Of course, the only thing I can claim is that we used a database that was a little bit longer, more extensive than others. But in general, the idea that wars are a self-organizing phenomenon seems to be reasonably accepted by those people who study these things. And but the question you asked is interesting. It's about population and welfare. So I can say that you see. Let's see if I can show you the data. Not so clear. Maybe I should have prepared a slide. But anyway, you can more or less see here in this diagram that the historical data is almost flat, and it picks up, bang, goes up during the 20th century. And that's would seem that wars are becoming more frequent, which is true. But if you simply normalize this figure to the increasing population, which you know goes up exponential, so you have a more even distribution. In my opinion, there was a sort of jump in between two periods, the modern period starting from the 30 Years' War and the previous period, the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages were relatively quiet as far as we know. So it was not a primitive age, it was not a savage age. So I think you can say that it is more or less an independent phenomenon, more people, more wars, but then it's simply because there are more occasions to go to war. Now the question you asked, however, is very interesting. Can we correlate the frequency of wars with the welfare? And that's, we didn't study it. We should do it. And it is a little bit difficult because we don't have the detailed data that should be needed to do this kind of study, but you gave me an idea that that may be worth pursuing, and we will see that how it works. Let's think about that. That's the best I can tell you now as an answer, and thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. And now we move to Goran.
Thank you, Edin, for this question. So I really think the human capital is the most sensitive resource of any society. And we need to, when we are thinking, to work only 4 days or to work 3 days or to work 5 days, I think we need to be much more concentrate on each individuals. We know that some people want to work actually 5 or 6 days, and some people don't want to work 3 days. I will be much more happy that we are coming in direction to society. Actually any employee can say, okay, I will be happy now to work only 3 days, or I will be happy to work only 5 days, or I will be happy to work each day only 4 hours. Of course, it is not easy for each work. It is not easy for each employment status, but for many employment status, that will be doable. We know many restrictions, bureaucratic restrictions in this direction, but as I said already, I think that human capital is the most sensitive, is most important for any society. And in the moment, these experiments you mentioned already in Holland and it was in different countries actually. But I'm not sure what is in the moment about this experiment. But as I said already, I think the most important is that the people, the worker, are really satisfied with the situation. They have good conditions. And it is not only the question how many days they work or how many hours they work. It is, of course, we need to have enough time for relaxation, for family, to enjoy life. That is really important because I think we are going in this direction. To be honest, I think we are going in this direction, especially in many developed countries. But this is not the direction we really need. We need much more equality in the world. So I'm not sure that we are going in all regions the same direction in the moment.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is, let's say, a very beginning. There are some experiments. There are many other experiments trying to, how can I say, study the possibilities of reducing the pressure on the social groups and to find out how this can be done and what kind of impact would have. And of course, probably there should be more studies related to that. Just to close from my side, I would like to tell you that just in this room, before our session, it was a session which was organized by the Arizona University, a very interesting session regarding the use of artificial intelligence for studying biology. And for me, it was something like a nonsense. I mean, to take kids and instead of showing them a zoo with real animals and plants, you put them to, you imagine that in order to make an artificial, how can I say, environment
virtual.
for them,
virtual.
it should be a huge work by a large team. They have to recreate a reality and then to invite the kids to jump into that reality, to experiment it and so on. But of course, probably the impact, because it is closer to their pleasure and their patterns of learning, the result was amazing, because they have seen that many kids succeeded to obtain much higher marks after this experiment. But now I'm coming to using the artificial intelligence, using the virtual reality into this kind of education for peace. And from that perspective, maybe is for the entire panel, do you think that if we shall move into that direction to generate different type of experiences to the children, to find out, as Goran experienced, for instance, at his 13 age, to experience, to stay, let's say, in the basement for 3 months, to be afraid of what is going around, and then to be a refugee. So this kind of artificial reality things could have much impact and could contribute, let's say, to the improvement and the development of this education for peace.
I think this is a very good point, Eden. Maybe the two panelists we have here can tell us about their experience. I mean, if they think that artificial intelligence can help in this endeavor, knowing that there is no substitute for humans. I mean, this is a limitation that we have to factor in no matter what. I mean, the cultural understandings, the reality on the ground has to be appreciated for what it is. And there is a high risk of conformity each time that we use machines rather than have a live kind of learning. In any case, my question to Professor Toplak and to Jonathan here with us is, what, starting from Ambassador Toplak, is art and creativity needed, as well as the use of machines and machine learning, a way to improve in terms of an education for peace and let's say advancing the issues of peace through education. So the question is art, creativity, and also the use of technology. Can that be combined? Professor Toplak, would you like to speak first?
Yeah. Mila said today, ethics and aesthetics. Aesthetics and ethics is needed. And that's why I think once again that logo pedagogy is offering all those answers for education, and we are leading to approach, especially younger generation. Elderly, there is needed on technical education. I think it's activities, but for the young generation, there is needed to offer them ethics and aesthetics. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Toplak. We have also Shoshana BEKERMAN online. Shoshana, would you like to take the question as well, briefly?
Well, yes, thank you. Well, I think the use of AI would be very useful in discussing the shared values. I don't know what happened with the video, but in any case, if you can hear me, I would assume that for young children, especially, to bring to life the life of the Prophet Abraham, as I mentioned, for the shared values would be very useful. We also have, as you mentioned, I think you mentioned the use of art. We have begun a youth program with the Art of Shared Values. We had children portray the shared values in the Abraham Accords. The children were in the United States. None of them were from the Abraham Accords nations, but we had them portray what they understood from the text, and the results were remarkable. We showed that at the United Nations and in several other occasions, and we are proceeding with having this kind of youth program to begin with before we have the curriculum for the children to express their views of what shared values are. This can be modeled in Africa and Asia, and of course, again, I think this is a very useful tool for education for the culture of peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beckerman. Do we have any question from the floor? Fellows of all the academy, I can see Solo Bahia, I can see, of course, Mila Popovic and others around here. Do we have questions for the speakers? If not, while you prepare any question, I would give the floor to Jonathan to address my question from before that you remember is art, creativity, and the use of artificial intelligence.
Well, I think it's wrong to call it intelligence. It's a word processing device that always deals with information from something that has happened, but not even the information, the use of symbolism about information. So to use it as a guide for anything is like driving your car by looking in the rear view mirror. We have to have a vision of where we want to go. And AI cannot do that by definition, because vision comes from inside of our humanity. That's the first point I want to make. Second point is bureaucracies of any kind privilege characters within the bureaucracy who utilize the technology of the bureaucracy best. AI, by its nature, is reductionist and privileges fast thinking, not reflective thinking. So I could spend from now until sunrise tomorrow telling about instances in which we almost ended civilization because of computer or human errors with nuclear weapons. And in every instance, it was an individual who said, yes, the computers are all showing a full-scale Soviet launch to the United States. Let's call the radar people up in Tule. Let's call the radar people in Alaska and look and see. Stanislav Petrov, 1983. All the computers in the Soviet Union showed a full-scale American launch. It was a cloud formation. In the other instance, was a computer chip that couldn't tell the difference between a sunrise and a launch of nuclear weapons. Wars are started because nobody stopped to reflect and think. The skills that are needed are human conflict resolution skills. That can only be taught by children learning them. So there are school systems that are really good at this. For example, Finland is good at this. They learn by playing. New Zealand is very good at this. They have a whole curriculum in their grammar schools on conflict resolution. I learned conflict resolution playing pickup basketball in the inner city, where you play hard against the other side and then and people are aggressive, but within the rule system. I am reminded that the modern state was created to stop two different stories of salvation based on the love of Jesus. One story said it can only come through a hierarchical system, Holy Roman Empire. The other system said, no, you don't need the hierarchy because everyone can now read the Bible. So the modern state, we have to realize, was created based on stories, not resource problems, not measurables, but stories. And The story of the modern state was, how do we separate these people who have stories about salvation and they don't mind slaughtering each other and they're not afraid to die, because in their story, if they are following the story well, they'll go to heaven even if they die. So I think, for example, of the story of the victims of World War I feeling victimized to the point that they had to other the whole world. We got Nazis. I think of the story between Eritrea and Ethiopia, fighting for decades over absolutely no resources, just a hunk of land for nothing, but it was a story of pride and ego. I think of the story of Israel and Palestine, again, a story of salvation. And here you don't have, there's an artificial resource scarcity now, but there wasn't before. So there wasn't for resource, which we often think of because you can measure that. It's about stories. On the North American continent, there were literally hundreds of nations before the Europeans came. The Hopis in the Southwest have a story of nonviolence and cooperation and a very egalitarian system. They wouldn't fight in the US Army. They all were conscientious objectors. The Sioux, on the other hand, in the plains, were warriors. They had stories that you obtained your manhood by going to war. So I think that when you look at the modern state, you couldn't create the modern state until you had national identity. And you couldn't have national identity until you had a common language. You couldn't have a common language with a common grammar until the printing press. So before Gutenberg, the language spoken in Normandy was not the same language spoken in Lyon. But after the printing press, a national language could be created and then a national identity. And I have seen in my travels around the world a cosmopolitan class that has grown up with the modern grammar of the digital age. Students in Nanking, I've seen students in Mexico City, I've seen students in Moscow. I was twice a lecturer at Seliger at Putin's youth camp. I followed Lavrov, was the resident scholar in residence. I followed him. Lavrov followed Putin. So I had real exposure. And I have seen all over the world a cosmopolitan class that's grown up with a global grammar. I have also seen, when you go to the villages in Russia, the tattoos on the neck, talking like this. I won't use the language, but it's not pleasant. I've seen the same psychology in Central America. And for these kids, modernity is not a benefit. They're watching porn on the internet. They're not learning about culture. They don't feel connected to the land. They don't trust their governments, and they don't have any religion. And they are amenable to populist rhetoric that makes them feel part of an identity that's violent. That cannot be helped by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is being used by those who are exploiting those people through fear. Our task is to find a way of addressing this new phenomena of the use of artificial intelligence to generate stories to control people violently. We've just seen it in the elections in the United States. We're seeing this phenomena of stories of othering in order to consolidate power. And AI is being used for that. No one have I seen is using AI for the purpose of stories that bring us together. Maybe it could be done, but we haven't seen it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Let's stay positive as we conclude this panel. Let's say that arts and humanities are essential in education. I think you agree with that, to cultivate emotional intelligence, to cultivate a positive state of mind. Well, after all, art is the metaphysics and the metaphor of life. And then this we have to somehow translate into reality.
I'm sorry, I didn't really conclude, which is
Yeah.
the perennial wisdom of all cultures is pretty much the same. We need to cultivate connectivity with people through the qualities that bring us together, that transcend selfishness, greed, vanity, egoism, that lead to alienation, dissatisfaction, and ultimately violence, and the qualities of compassion that leads to justice and love and caring for one another as the foundation for the wisdom of how to operate. There's nothing new about what the solutions are, in my opinion. The problems are our creation, and they may be new and creative, but the solutions come back to the perennial wisdom of all cultures. The WAAS in all of them emphasize love, compassion, justice, and things that bring us together.
Exactly. Things that bring us together. Let me thank the speakers online, Hugo BARDI, Shoshana, of course, Goran, and SHRIVASTAVA before. Of course, I thank our co-moderator, Eden MAMUT, and Jonathan, Professor TOPLAK. And actually, I want to conclude again restating the essence of the vision statement of Maribor that Professor TOPLAK was mentioning before. You know, to end wars, we shall harness all fields of education, research, technological advancement to promote peaceful coexistence. So with these ends, the panel is concluded. Thanks a lot to all participants.